Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Career Climb. We were on a brief hiatus, but now we are back. And if this is your first time watching, The Career Climb is where we spark conversations with executives and industry leaders. And this is where they share their perspectives on leadership and workplace culture through real life cases, not theory. We talk practical stuff around here. And I can't wait for you to meet tonight's guest, Matt Wolfe. But if you and I have never met before, I'm your host, Julia Rock. I'm the founder and CEO at Rock Career Development. We're a Houston-based consulting firm that helps organizations to retain their best talent and get the best out of them through leadership development solutions. And so I'm excited that you're in the building with us tonight. If you want to catch up on this episode and past episodes of The Career Climb, you can connect with me here on LinkedIn, or you can head to rockcareer.com/CC archive to view our YouTube playlist. And as always, I would love for you to interact with us in the chat. Matt and I are going to have a really rich conversation around clarity and messaging in leadership. So I would love for you to drop your comments, share with us where you're watching from, any insights or anything that stands out to you. Please make sure that you're talking to us and talking back to us. But enough of the preamble, enough of the talk here. I'm ready for you to meet my special guest, Matt Wolfe. He is the partner and director of brand strategy at Brand 3. And we're going to dig into the importance of messaging and branding and leadership. So, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just good to see you. It's nice to see you again.
Man, I have got to say that I feel like you are like one of the just my favorite people that I have met at this point this year, because I just feel like we were able to just meet because we met at the Grow conference.
Houston, Texas.
Yes. And so we've been able to just stay connected. And I'm glad that you just were willing to take my invitation for today's conversation.
Yeah. I wrote on LinkedIn. I don't know if you saw it yesterday, but I wrote on LinkedIn that one of the great, and I mean it, one of the great joys of this year for me was getting to meet you and get to know you. So I'm just glad I get to hang out.
Thank you so much. And so I know how awesome you are personally, but I would love for you to introduce yourself to the viewers.
Yeah. So, like she said, I'm Matt Wolfe, partner at Brand 3 Marketing. I came to marketing by way of theater, so that's a big part of my background. I was a professional theater artist for more than 25 years in every level of the business and every role, and that was all about storytelling. It was about telling stories in the most powerful and effective ways possible, and now I do that for businesses. Brand 3 is a full service agency, and I'm sure I'm going to end up talking more about the philosophy behind that and why I'm here today. But we specialize in serving businesses who are we say established service and solution providers. We're looking for people who have a proven ability in some way to take great care of the people that we send to them. You know, of the leads that we're able to send, that they have a proven ability to deliver great service, whether that's through 5-star reviews or some other kind of evidence. But that's everything. And the people that we work with they're people who have a heart to make a difference, is what we find. It could be B2B, it could be professional services, home services, but they could even be nonprofit as a form of service, but they really believe in making a difference. They care about the people that they serve. They're just really frustrated that they can't seem to connect with the right audience, that they can't get their marketing to click, and they've probably wasted a lot of time and money trying to do that. And that's where we come in and help them make that connection.
And I think that's probably a good segue as you talk about that frustration. When we think about, why would we need to have this conversation, about kind of messaging and branding and leadership? And I wonder if some of that would probably also be rooted in some level of frustration. It may not be that you're selling a product, but there's probably some level of frustration there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people might be wondering why you're talking to a marketing guy today on the leadership podcast, but this is how I'll explain it. The tool, essentially the tools that we use in marketing they have great opportunity to serve leaders elsewhere in a business. and in working with their teams and building culture and unifying teams. And they are greatly under recognized and underutilized. So that's really why I'm here today, to help people see new possibilities. You and I were talking before the call started, and you said you talk about leadership as really sales. You have to bring people on it. And I would say it's marketing and sales. It's about the communication of an idea, which builds trust for a deeper conversation where you can sell it. And so the two really work well together.
Yeah, and I think that when we think about the common misconceptions, maybe when it comes to messaging and branding, it's always that thought about you're selling a thing, you're marketing a thing, but leadership is really marketing and sales. I think back to my time as a leader in corporate. A lot of my job was getting people on board, whether it was peers, whether it was my bosses, whether it was the team that I was responsible for. You had to get people on board, and if something wasn't communicated correctly, if people didn't buy what you were selling, it was dead in the water. And so now you've got to go back and figure out, how do we get these folks on board? And it's kind of how you come up with that messaging. So I'm not sure your thoughts on any sort of misconceptions, but that's what I've seen.
Yeah. The biggest misconception that we address as a company, we preach something we call a brand first marketing strategy. And here's what that means. When marketing goes sideways, a lot of people will look to the tactical side of things to fix what's gone wrong. They'll say, well, we didn't spend enough on ads. We're not doing enough SEO. We didn't use this technology. We didn't do this thing. We need a new campaign that's really clever over here, and Band-Aids this thing or Band-Aids that. But what we find is that 90-something% of the time, the problem isn't out there in the tactics and the campaigns. It's at the foundation of your marketing, which is your brand. But brand, it gets really misunderstood and underutilized because a lot of people think of it as logos and colors and sort of frou-frou things. But what a brand should be, what it really is a powerful story that you tell to reach the right audience. It's about creating strategic alignment between who you are as a business and your ideal customers and clients, and creating a story that bridges those two things and helps them talk to each other in a way that wins trust, and eventually onboards people to your services and solutions. But that's the piece that most people are missing. And we're going to keep talking about it, but when you go all the way down to leadership, you can either tell people to do things, you can give them mission statements, you can give them goals and instructions, which are all important. They're all part of what you need to do, but there's also the opportunity to invite people into a story. And that gives them a sense of purpose and meaning and identity that can root them. So what we tell people, the first thing is you've got to fix your brand first. And then there's really good news after that, because once you fix your brand, now that'll fix marketing, that'll get that rolling, that'll generate qualified leads and do everything it's supposed to do, but it should not sit there. If you have a great story about who you are as a business and the people who you serve, that can help sales and marketing align and stop fighting, start getting along and working together and doing great things. It can help refine and reshape your customer experience because you're thinking about those people and their journey as it continues on past the website and that initial messaging. And it can even help inform the foundations of how you build culture and bring people together as a team. And that's really why I'm here today, because all the way down the line, you have these opportunities to use that core brand story to unify your people.
And I think that that's so I'm going to go off script a little bit, because I think that that's where people lose it, right? That, hey, I have to tell the story externally. Like if I want to sell something to a client, a customer, that I have to have the story to tell them to make them buy and make them, resonate with the brand or what have you. But we don't really apply that internally to say, hey, I need to have this same conversation with my employees, with the colleagues here. I need to share that story so that they also buy in and it resonates with them and they understand that, hey, we're not just making widgets here. You're part of something bigger. And so I love that idea.
Yeah, it comes from that agreement around who are your actual ideal clients and audience. And then that really shapes the image of who you're serving. It comes in getting clarity about the problem that you solve for them and that begins to form a sense of purpose and meaning behind what you're doing. And the next step in the messaging is about really defining what is unique about you as an organization. What is the unique way in which you solve that problem? And all of that begins to give people a sense of identity of, oh, that's what I'm a part of. Yeah. Oh, cool. That's great. Good to know. Like they, and until you do that, you know, it's at the end of the day, it's simple stuff that needs to get created. It takes a lot of conversation and time to get there. But what it does is put people all in the same story, because until you do that, everyone has their own sort of version of who you are and what you do.
Yeah. And
that's where the chaos and the confusion starts to set in, because everyone thinks you are about something different, or that the priority is over here, over there. Or I thought this is who we serve. I thought this is how I fit in. You can help them all be part of the same thing. And that unity is powerful.
Man, you know, I'm just loving this conversation, because as you talk about the fact of like, that's where the chaos has come from, because I'm just reflecting on all my corporate experiences where the teams things have gone awry. We don't know what the priorities are. We're trying to, you know, herd the cats, as they say. And I just wonder if we had spent the time to get on board as to what is it that we're actually trying to solve? Who are we trying to serve? If we were all on the same page about that, we probably would have saved ourselves tons of time. But because, you know, we didn't have that kind of core story, that foundation, we were all over the place. So, man, I'm excited.
Yeah. And you know, it's not having the story, and then it's also not having the opportunity to invite people in to talk about it, absorb it, contribute to it. So, and what I found is that the discovery work that you do for this kind of branding work to find this story, at the end of the day, it means everyone gets to take a break and sit down and take a breath and think about, okay, wait, who are we? Because it's been 3 or 5 years or 10 years since we had a conversation like this, because we don't take the time for it. Oh my God, what happened in the market? What changed? How did our services change? You know, a lot shifts in 2, 3, 5 years. And it gives people a chance to catch up to it, reestablish that sense of identity. And I think a lot of marketers are kind of afraid to touch the business strategy stuff, like they feel like it's not that lane, but they really do merge. And so we kind of jump in where angels fear to tread and just get in there. And we were just at a manufacturing facility on the East Coast that is really excited. It's a beautiful story. They've been there 80 plus years. They're excited about reshoring some manufacturing to the United States that was lost in the last 20, 30 years. But it's a new owner, new executive, plus some really deeply legacy people in the room. And we quickly figured out, oh, geez, okay, well, our job today isn't just discovery for marketing, but we kind of have to help pull this team together. They've never had these conversations. So they all kind of want to do the same thing, but they have a different version of who they serve and what it is. And without those conversations, I think they're much stronger because of the conversations we had. They're better aligned. So,
man, and before we get into the case study, I'm just thinking about what you said about having people who have been there a long time, and then you have kind of new executives. Because, you know, when I worked in oil and gas, you know, my company, I worked at ExxonMobil, and, you know, during my time there, we were integrating one organization, XTO. And I think about some of those kind of like, well, if you were in the heritage ExxonMobil organization, you saw things this way. And if you were from XTO, you saw things this way. And so there was a lot of that kind of difference of mindset, culture, process, approach. And so, like you said, yes, you want to talk about the marketing and actually making the widgets, but it seems like, you know, at the core, it's like, we just got to get the team on the same page. We just got to get to marching to the beat of the same drum. And so with that, I feel like that's a good lead in for us to talk about Danielle.
Okay. We got to help her.
Yes. So for those who are listening, this is the segment where we're going to get into the case study. But if you've heard anything so far that one has resonated with you, or if you have questions for Matt, please go ahead and drop those in the chat so that we make sure that we don't miss you. So let's talk about the case study. So it's about whether the person's a clear communicator or a confusing leader. So poor Danielle, let's see how we can help her. So for those who are listening, let me give you some facts about Danielle. So she is the vice president of marketing for a rapidly growing fintech company. She knows how to craft good creative campaigns. She has good energy, and people admire her for getting things done. But over the past year, the company has scaled so rapidly from 200 to 600 employees. And now because of that growth, there are some cracks in and some seams busting around how the company communicates both inside the organization and out. So this is not just an external branding problem. So here's the situation at hand. In a board meeting that Danielle was in, a senior investor asked, what does the company stand for? And all the members of the executive team around Danielle had a different answer. Some people talked about the technology, the customer service. And so from her perspective, she felt that if the leadership couldn't articulate the company story, neither could anyone within the organization or their customers. So here are some of the issues that they were having. So employees were feeling like they were getting mixed signals about their priorities. So they were doing duplicate work. Customers were receiving inconsistent messaging. So they were confused about the product offerings. Executives within the company were wondering about the marketing team's effectiveness because of all of this. And so Danielle is sitting there and she's worried about, without them having a unified message, one, the company's growth could stall, and then her own reputation as a VP of marketing could also suffer, because this is supposed to be her wheelhouse. So here's the crossroads, and this is where I'm going to bring you in, Matt. So the question for poor Danielle is that, does she continue pushing out these creative campaigns and just kind of hope for the best, or does she take some sort of really bold strategy steps, intentional steps around a unified brand message? So one that can, help to guide where things are going internally, so they're not all fragmented and all over the place, but also in terms of how they face their customers. So for those who are listening, if you have questions about the case study, drop that for Matt and myself. And so let me cue this up here, Matt. So listening to what happened to Danielle, before we get into the guiding questions, I would love to hear your thoughts about, have you seen things like this where companies have, they've grown and they've scaled and they had one vision and they were all on the same page at the start, and then as they grew, the cracks started to show? Have you seen some of these things before?
Yeah, I think so. And it's because people aren't having these conversations. I mean, the question you asked at the end, does she keep pushing out creative campaigns? Hope that things get better. That's well said. Or does she take bold, intentional steps to align around a unified brand message? And by now, people probably know what I'm going to say. Yes, slow down, take time to figure out that brand message. But you really set me up well for this. And that, that's the idea. We look to campaigns, we look to Band-Aids instead of fixing the foundation. So yeah, as a company grows, and like that example you gave, 200 to 600 a year, my God, there's so much energy just in forward momentum and training and onboarding. The last thing that'll probably get transmitted, or the first thing to be forgotten, is some legacy information from the core leadership of this is who we are and this is who we have been. And it's a perfect example that you're going to have these hundreds of people going out and beginning to create their own little stories about who this is, who they are, what they're a part of. And especially if there's not a story, if there's just a mission statement, a vision statement, and it's not that those aren't important, but it's different than inviting people into a narrative. There's a difference between when you hand people information or a guideline, or invite them into a narrative. I learned that the hard way. I was a preacher's kid growing up. My dad was a Methodist pastor for years, and I learned from watching him, and then in other scenarios like that, man, you could talk at somebody. Well, my dad was short. He talked 15, 20 minutes, but I've seen people talk 30, 45 minutes. You can do all that talking or any business meeting, whatever. But what people will remember is a great story. That's what they'll take away,
Absolutely. I mean, and as you know, Matt, so I do keynotes, and a lot of what I do is in the keynotes is share stories, because you can give people the insights or the motivation, but in order for for things to resonate with people, they've got to see themselves in the story or feel that what you're saying is relatable and pick out those nuggets, because then everything else is a little bit easier to retain. But if I'm
Mhm.
just going up there and giving some sort of facts or inspiration, it's like, okay, well, I've heard this before, and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But if you're able to tell that good story that ties people together, and it's like,
Yeah.
yes, I too have had that situation, or yes, that's something I want to be a part of, it just sticks a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. There's only so many buzzwords to go around, right? Like we've used all the language, right? We've got our synergy, and we've got our energy, and we've got our I don't know, holistic whatevers. We've got all that out there. They're all the right words. It's just that we've heard them all, and
Yeah.
it's exactly right. They take on new meaning in a narrative.
Absolutely. So let me ask this question, because we're talking about the importance of having a story to tell and making sure you're on the same page. But here's where I'm wondering if we could find ourselves in problems where, so how is it that leaders can ensure that their personal communication style doesn't conflict with the organization's brand messaging? Because I wonder if that may also be where there is some disconnect. And oh, by the way, Matt, you have a fan in the chat here. We've got Dana Casto. Matt Wolfe is a genius brand messaging strategist. So you've got some fans showing up for you. But
Dana's very kind. I have Dana to thank for meeting you, because he got me to go to that conference. So
okay, all right. So Dana the connector.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And he's also brilliant, by the way. Yeah, this is a great question, right? So how do you ensure your personal communication style doesn't conflict with that overall brand messaging? When I think of this, it actually takes me, I think a good metaphor example for this is back in my acting experience in theater.
mm,
So when I was an actor, I had to figure out who the character was that I was playing.
mm,
But I had to do that in the context of a larger story, right? There's a script that gives me a lot of information. And if I create a character not attending to all of that other information, then people are not going to enjoy that show. It's not going to make any sense the way that I'm behaving. It would be like taking James Bond and putting him in a Star Wars movie, and he just doesn't know. And now you can
that's an
tell the kind of
interesting twist.
you can tell the kind of things I enjoy. But no, you're a character in the context of a larger story. So leaders spend a lot of time trying to figure out what kind of character am I as a leader, really, right? Like we do figure out our leadership style, we figure out our personality style, and we take the Enneagrams and the Myers-Briggs and the whatevers, right? We attach ourselves to a certain management platform, system, philosophy, cult, right? whatever we choose. But we all those things form our, I'm sure no one's in a cult, I'm sure everyone's fine, but we all of those things form the character of who you are as a leader.
Yeah.
So that character is going to arrive if the company has a well-formed brand story. Otherwise, we got to do that first. But if that's in place, your character is going to become part of that narrative. And I thought I would show you real quick for those. So I am also a StoryBrand certified consultant. I'm coming into my 7th year in that program. And so the framework that we use at Brand 3, an essential part of what we do to figure out the brand story for people is we use this proven marketing framework. And I thought I would just show, I'm not going to go deep into it, but I just want to show people what it is real quick, because that is going to just create a lot of really helpful context. So let me I have the simplest of
Once you hit share, I should get it
images
on my
here, or I did have, let's see, let me pull this up.
And
there it is.
so folks, this is the time for you. So we're going to dig into some things here. So get your questions. But that's the point of tonight's conversation, is for you to get some tangible things to take with you. So I'll turn it back over to you, Matt.
So yeah, and I'm going to show you this, and then I promise everyone I'm going to come back and directly answer that question that you asked. But see, this is the kind of information that you can have as your character as a leader steps into a good, well-formed brand story. So in terms of StoryBrand, we're looking for, it's a 7-part framework. You have a character with a problem who meets a guide who gives them a plan and calls them to action on a journey that will end in either failure or success. So we have to define who the character is. That's the ideal audience, ideal client, customer for the company that we're speaking to. And we try and get really clear about the most important thing that they want that the company can help them with. And then we have to really define a problem that they are up against. We look at that from different angles. What's the practical problem in the way? How does that make them feel? Things like that. But in doing those two first steps, we've created a bridge of empathy with people. That's how I describe it, because we're able to go to somebody and say, hey, I get what you want, what you are after, and I really get what you're up against. And just doing that simple exercise of empathy earns a lot of trust from people.
For sure.
The next part of the framework says meets a guide, and that's the business. And that's, without going too deep into it, that's the biggest corrective that StoryBrand brought to the table in terms of marketing messaging, is that it repositioned businesses from trying to play the hero in their marketing to playing the helpful guide who arrives just in time. If you use a Star Wars metaphor, like I like to do, they go from being Luke Skywalker to being Obi-Wan Kenobi or Yoda, who we immediately know, even when we just see them step on screen, we know they are more experienced, they are wiser, stronger, and they just kind of know what's up. Whereas Luke is at the very beginning of his journey. What happens is that most businesses try to jump into the hero role, into the protagonist role. And it comes in some form of the business leaping in with their marketing messaging to say, hey, I'm really good at this. I promise. Pick me, right? Like, you can trust me. Here's all the reasons why you can trust me. But
that sounds like a lot of leaders that I know where they, that sounds like a lot of leaders who are just like, listen to me, follow me.
No, a million percent. And right. That's how they'll begin their first meetings with leaders. It's how a lot of us begin our presentations to boards and teams and conferences, as we try and prove and establish our authority in the room first. And it backfires every time, because what's really going on is you and I in this moment, and everyone that's on this call, we all see ourselves as the hero of our own story. We see ourselves as the protagonist of our own narrative. If the business or the leader steps into that role and tries to take that over, there's a tension there, and it just doesn't fit. But if a leader in communicating to their team takes a second to say, I really get what you want, I get what you're up against, and I have been through it before myself, and I have a way to help you, that's a whole different conversation that began with empathy and invitation and earned some trust before talking about why they're qualified. So as a business, you do the same thing. You say to your ideal clients, we understand what you want, what you're up against. We have a solution, and we would love to serve you and help you solve that problem, which is a very different conversation than, please, you can trust us. It's just a much more productive thing. So you have a character, problem, meets a guide, and then we have to make sure we give them a plan, a sense of where the journey is going, along with why that guide is qualified. We got to call them to action, because all of us need to be told to do things that are good for us. And we need to be told to do that over and over again. And then we paint a picture in the messaging that reminds them on the failure side that there's something to be won or lost in the story. There is still a danger that things could go sideways without the right help. But also, and most importantly, there's so much to be gained on the other end of working with your company, that there is great success and reward at the end of going on that journey with you and experiencing your services. So those are the key parts of the narrative that we work on for a brand story. But back to your question, if you are a character in the story as a leader, you have so much more information now about how to engage with your unique communication style. And that's going to have everything to do with who you serve, what they're up against, and what's unique about this company. So maybe if you're the go-getter, like push them all, let's hit our goals kind of leader, right? Or even tough love leader, you're going to have to think about the fact that maybe you're in a medical services company, and they are serving people who are in a vulnerable state, who have very personal problems, and they take great pride in their ability to enter into this sort of fragile state with people and provide some unique solutions to that. So maybe, and that doesn't mean that you're wrong in your approach. It just means, how do you enter into this story? And maybe instead of just pushing for goals, you can just adjust your language to be, hey, let's fight a little harder to help more people. right? But because that's the story that you're a part of. But you're going to have a lot more information to take your character as a leader and your communication style if there is a unified story that everybody has agreed on about what that business is and what they're about. So I'll turn that
I
off.
I I really love that the breakdown of that. I hope that you guys were paying attention because that was gold. You're getting paid you're getting paid insights right here for free. But I think one of the biggest things you talked about was taking yourself out of the story and not trying to be the hero. I feel like as leaders especially, we feel like we have to be the hero, the knight in shining armor, and we're riding in on
Mhm.
the horse and all of that, and we're trying to center ourselves when leadership is not about us, right? And so with following that framework, is it's you realize that your job is to help, job is to lead, to guide people to a particular objective that will allow them to solve whatever problem they're having, but it's not about you. You're not the princess in the story, right? And
Mhm.
so I feel like that was just a really really powerful just review for folks who are listening and who may be going through what Danielle is going through, right? Your company is growing and scaling, and and maybe your leaders are starting to center themselves in the story instead of realizing that that's not their job. So I love that.
Yeah, it's
um
just servant-hearted leadership at the end of the day. But the right messaging sets you free to live into that role, and to be that person.
Man, so I've got a question for that I would want to follow up with is that so we've talked a little bit about kind of the overall concept, right? That we want to get people on the same page and kind of very aspirational and intangible in nature. But Danielle's got a problem.
Mhm.
She's on the struggle bus. So what are some practical steps that you think Danielle can take to build the alignment among the executives? Because clearly the investors don't know what's going on, the executives are confused, everyone's confused. So, what do you think are some practical, tangible steps that she can take, and then also bring clarity to both the employees as well as the external brand?
Yeah, the most practical, simple thing is you just got to get everybody in a room together. The key leaders, we've got to get them in a room to do some focused discovery work, hopefully guided by a qualified brand strategist who can dig in with them. But this is what that looks like. You don't jump to that framework that I just showed everyone. You do some background work with everyone, and you check in on. And you're going to check in on, okay, who are we as a business?
Mm,
And then you're going to start to see those little different narratives, right, kind of pop up around the room, and those discrepancies, and have a chance for everyone to align on the same story.
yeah.
um, who are we? Where are we going? What are our business goals if we're not clear about that right now? We do things like SWOT analyses and we talk about mission and vision and what's at the beating heart of this company. We do everything we can to understand who the business is right now and what their
Mhm.
services are. And you'll find in those discovery meetings, people will struggle just to sort of describe, okay, but these are our services, right? But it's just a chance for everyone to align. You figure out who the business is, then you got to figure out who that business is for. If this is who we are today, now that we've caught up to that, well, then who is that for? Who actually is our ideal client? And that's when you develop whatever you want to call it, a persona, an avatar. We got all the names for it, but it's a picture and a portrait of the ideal client for that. And then you go to the work of using a messaging framework like StoryBrand to create a story that will bridge that. But it's really simple. Who is the business? I mean, in between is a lot of stuff, but the goal is simple. Who is the business? Who is it for? And what is the story that will help the business talk to that person, win their trust enough to move on in a conversation?
You know what I love about this conversation is the fact that we're not trying to get hung up on all like, and you referenced this earlier, was around the buzzwords, right? Like this is a very simple approach, and I think we've just overcomplicated leadership. I mean, that's
Yeah.
pretty much my tagline now: is leadership is not complicated, it's just hard. And I think sitting in a room with your peers and especially at an executive level, it's hard, especially if you've got seven
Yeah.
different people and you have seven different narratives pop out. You
Mhm.
can't synergize and circle back and band with yourself to death with all those buzzwords, right? Like you have to actually get work done, and you can't use all of your personality types and things to get you there. It's truly about just doing the hard work and doing that kind of review and seeing, well, we are all on different pages here. So I just
Yeah.
love the fact of like just the simplification of this process.
Yeah, I love how you say that it's just hard, and that an honest conversation is probably the hardest thing to do. And you'll have a moment in there where you'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe everyone is so on like a different whatever. Oh my God. But you just have to breathe that out, absorb that,
Right.
and just know it's human, and then push through it to the next thing.
Yeah, and so for those who are listening who may be having this challenge, maybe you haven't scaled from 200 to 600, but perhaps you are scaling, or perhaps it just seems that there's different narratives within your organization. Part of it may just be going back to the very beginning, like Matt just shared, and just sitting in a room and kind of getting on the same page. Throw out all your frameworks and all your personalities, your DISC, your Hogan, whatever you have, and just kind of get to the meat of it and really try to simplify that process. And so the question I would have though is kind of on the flip side of that, because you talked a little bit about building that trust and having that message to build trust.
Yeah.
But so my thought would be, how would inconsistent messaging erode trust? Is it just because people feel like, okay, well, you said this, but I don't believe you? I'm just wondering, like, in term, because trust is easy to lose. It
Mm.
takes some time to build, and it's easy to lose. And I'm just wondering, like, how, especially with inconsistent messaging, how does it erode that trust?
Yeah, inconsistent messaging causes confusion, which is what erodes trust. As soon as people get confused about what you're trying to tell them and confused about where they fit in the story of they can't see themselves in that story, that begins to damage trust. So I was thinking about this earlier today, and we usually think about messaging as being something that's meant to provoke a certain behavior. Our messaging is meant to get somebody to do a thing, to schedule a consultation, to buy a thing, to whatever. But messaging is also about identity. And it's very much about identity. So what's really happening is when you're messaging on your website, or from your website to the next step, confuses a potential client or customer, it creates a crisis of identity. And really the message to them is, oh, I thought you were the person who could help me with this thing, but maybe not. And this thing's really important to me, so maybe I need to spend my time elsewhere. Right? That's but it does the same thing for your team. Back to the leadership thing. You had a brand story that people thought they were a part of, and when that shifts, gets confusing, people on your team are like, wait, I thought this was the story I was a part of. I thought this was why I mattered. I thought this is why my identity in this organization makes a difference. And that's what gets wrecked. So that's why it's such a dire cost to confusing people.
Man.
If you
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, just if you think about that framework I showed you earlier. So once you've established what a hero of the story wants, the problem that they face, and the unique ways that you solve it, you've gone a long way to create focus for who we are as a company. And like the example you gave, all the people in the boardroom told the different stories, and they all said, well, I think we're about this, we're about that. When you have those bits of information, you can finally make a decision about, oh, but this is the thing that we do that's unique, that's most important to the people we serve. Mm-hmm. And that's the message that leads the day. And that becomes the umbrella under which everything else can fit. Everything else that people think is important about what the company does, still important. But what is it in service to and in relation to who you serve? So.
And I want to take a moment to go back to the comment you made about where it's like, in terms of that trust, and the person feels like, oh, well, I thought we were about this, or I thought we were about that. I think back to my time in corporate. It, like, sometimes even if we were changing a process or implementing a project or something, and it didn't seem aligned with what our overall company message has been, people are like, wait, I didn't think we were this kind of company. I didn't think we did this. I didn't, so people start to feel that confusion, and they're wondering, hey, is this the company that I joined 5 years ago, 10 years ago? It seems different now. And there's nothing wrong with evolution, but people feel like they're either getting left behind or they missed a memo somewhere, because now the company is adopting practices and doing things that they had never done before, and no one no one passed the message downstream. And I guess that's the question I would have to it kind of rounding us out here, is when you think about that leadership conversation at the top, right? Everyone gets in the room and they're all on the same page and so on. But then you've got to actually cascade that down, right?
Yeah.
Like it has to be an everyday kind of lived experience. And so what does it really look like to embed that brand messaging into the day-to-day leadership, that so that the employees can hear it, they can experience it and see it in real life, and it doesn't just stay up at the top with the C-suite folks?
Yeah, it's fun. Earlier you said don't overcomplicate it, and that's exactly where my mind goes for this kind of application.
Yeah.
The danger is that it will be overcomplicated, and the power is in simple movements and gestures. So obviously the first thing, if it's going to begin to infiltrate, that's probably the wrong word, to weave its way into the company culture.
Infiltrate sounds a little bit more sinister.
It does, right? So it depends on how frustrated you are with your team. But, but you want people to know and begin to absorb this, but it will not happen in a memo or an email, right? Just like when you sent your mission statement out and then everyone forgot about it. But so the simplest thing you can do is get people around a table to talk about it. This is the new story of who we are as a company. This is our new brand messaging. I'm going to share this with all of you, and let's talk about it. Let's just talk. And how does this change our approach to what we're doing? How does it celebrate what we've already done? How does it challenge us to change in the future? But those are simple questions. But you've got to get people around the table who are on your team to talk about it and talk with their teams and just engage again in a real, honest conversation, because that's where they will actually start to absorb it, internalize it, and own it. And have a chance to ask those hard questions about, okay, well, wait, but this changed, and you're going to have the people who are going to struggle with that, but there's room for that to air out and make the transition. So I just think talking about it, inviting people into it is huge. And then to come back to it, to reinforce it often. So I think you can reinforce it in future forums and meetings and say, okay, we said this message 3 months ago, a quarter, a half year ago. Let's come back to it and see how we're doing. How much are we living into this, and where's the room to improve? But just as or to jump into one piece of it, because like I showed you, you've got a framework where you could just for the day say, okay, this is the problem that we said we solve for everyone. How are we doing with that? And how are we improving on that? This is the success that we promised people. Are we delivering on that? You can have those little piecemeal conversations that continue, but you can also then reinforce it by how you talk to your team. And if you've got praise to heap on them because something just went great, you can tie it back to the story. So it's not praise in a vacuum. We just hit this goal for Q4, which means that we helped these characters do this thing that made their life better. And so you tie them back to what the character wanted and the success that they experienced on the other side. But you put that stat, that goal, that accomplishment back into a narrative. Great way to reinforce that. And you got to celebrate the outcomes together, right? Like the first thing we forget is to pass on a great case study to the rest of our team about something good we did, a testimonial, a review. Pass all of that down, but again, in the context of this larger narrative. Hey, gang, we said we were going to be this and serve these people this way and do this for them. We did it. Look, we did it. And then finally, the last thing you can do, which I would recommend, is a lot of what we're talking about is we've got an external message, right, for who the business serves and who they are. But it absolutely does behoove you can use this kind of messaging for internal HR and culture development. And so you can create another narrative that is about, okay, the hero of our story are our employees. Here are some of the big problems that they face, and here's how we help address that and help them overcome those things and thrive as a company. But then that's not an internal whatever strategy memo. That's something that you share with them. And it's a promise that gets made to the team. This is who we promise to be to you. this thing that we forged out of feedback that came from you and what you've been telling us. We want to be this guide for you and your careers, and we're going to ask you to hold us to it. Now you've got a promise and a pact, and you're building culture in terms of who you serve on the outside and then how you take care of the people who do it. So,
Man,
messaging, marketing, and sales with a benevolent twist of really caring for people with authentic desire to make their lives better.
man, there's just so much to unpack there. There's so much to unpack there, because one of the things, especially towards the end there, where it was really the reference to accountability, right? Where the organization and the leaders are saying, hey, this is who we promise to be to you, and you can hold us to this. I think what happens in organizations and where the trust gets lost is because leaders can do things, they can screw up, and there's no accountability. Most times leaders will screw up and they get promoted. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not even, it's not even like any accountability. It's like their careers actually do better. And so I think this messaging around, hey, you can hold us to this and hold us accountable, that also helps to build trust with your employees, because they feel like, okay, so it's not just some other throwaway theory or strategy that we're just going to shelve and never look at again. This is something that the organization and my leadership is saying, hey, we're going to do this for you. We listen to you. We value your feedback. And if we don't do this, you can call us out on it, because we're expecting you to hold us accountable. So that was one of the biggest things that stood out for me in what you said.
Thank you. And again, you're going to do the simplest thing in the world, and you're going to come back to a quarter later, 2 quarters later, and talk with your team about, well, we said we would do this. How are we doing? And you're in, and on the flip side of what you said, like they're the things that get messed up. But also, if that story isn't in place, you also don't get credit for the good things that you did.
True.
Which isn't about getting credit. It's about earning trust, right? We lived up to, but when there's no story, there's no baseline. There's no way to understand that something was done on their behalf and that promises are being kept. So,
man, I hadn't thought of it that way either, in terms of like, if you don't have a story, that means you don't have a baseline. So when you want to celebrate these things, it's like, well, like where is that place that we're celebrating from, right? Because we don't have anything that we started with, and so from my perspective, it sounds like the key here is not only coming up with the story, but also reinforcing it and recommunicating it. So again, it doesn't just happen one time in one meeting. It sounds like, you've got to keep coming back to the table. Like you said, every quarter, how are we doing versus what we said? Any additional thoughts? So it sounds like it's over communication in addition to actually having a brand story. Do I have that right?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty good. It's kind of like, oh man, this is going to sound really nerdy, but it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons. Like when people do that, or they do role-playing games.
Yes.
The whole idea is y'all set a story out together, you figure out who the characters were, but you keep coming back into it. And the story keeps progressing and developing, and the core thing of what it was keeps getting reinforced. So, you're just inviting people to still be part of that story, because sending it out once won't make it live. It'll tell people you had good intent, but then when you keep inviting them back into it, then it starts to live and they become part of it. So yeah, I think I would argue that it's almost impossible to lead people in a unified way without them having a narrative that they all share. So
for those who are listening, I feel like that's a good landing point to think about. Can you truly lead your organization right now, whether you're leading 2 people or 2,000? Can you lead them successfully if you don't have a unified narrative that people are all on board with? Because if people have their own narratives, they're going to march to the beat of that drum. And so that means we're all doing our own thing, and there's no way for you to achieve the common goal. So I love that. So as we round this out, so we've given Danielle some good advice here. Are there any final words for the Danielles that are listening, based on everything we've talked about so far today in the conversation? Any final words for Danielle, or the Danielles that are listening?
Yeah. Yep. Because I asked you to do a really hard thing. I asked you to get leaders around a table and give you their time. to talk about a story. And then they're going to be like, I'm not interested in stories. I'm interested in revenue. I'm
Right.
interested in
Like,
growth.
save that for something else. We can do that on a team building retreat.
Yeah, right. That's, yeah.
3 quarters from now, we'll sit around and sing Kumbaya.
Yeah, we'll do that around drinks in Vegas at the conference when we're there, and we can take 15 minutes to. Yeah, no, and you need a day or two or whatever of their time. So so this is really important. So I'm glad you asked and made me think of it. When you talk about creating a great brand message, either for the company or internally for building culture, it is about taking great care of people, but it is about making money. It is about growth, because it's about how do you convince people to trust your team, your products and services. And on the internal side, how do you promote productivity and loyalty and retention from your staff? So at the end of the day, it is meant to and must be held accountable to drive revenue and growth.
And
And
so
that's
so we
how
weren't
you
trying to
can
make it touchy. It's not all touchy feely, y'all. The whole idea is
Yeah.
that the touchy feely is how you open the door to making sure that you get more revenue. And I think a lot of times in my work in leadership, people feel like it's an HR thing and it's touchy feely. But it's like, if you want to grow revenue, if you want to grow profitability, you can't do that if you have ineffective leadership. You can't lead the charge and get your customers engaged, get your employees engaged and productive if you don't have good leadership. So I know someone may say, we don't have time to get people to sit around the table, but you have to think about what's at stake if you don't get the people around the table.
Yeah, we are none of us just goals or metrics or analytics or mission statements or vision statements. We're human. So when you tell a great story, it acknowledges the humanity in people, and that's what pulls out the best in them. So that's the reason you do it.
I love that. Well, Matt, this has been such a fun and just rich conversation. I'm so glad that you accepted my invite, because this has been awesome. Before we wrap up, though, I want to give you the space that if folks have listened to this and say, hey, either I want to learn more about the story brand framework, or I just want to work with you at Brand 3, how can folks get in touch with you and work with you?
Yeah. So again, we shine with working with any sort of established service or solution provider. It can be any kind of service that you can think of, but if you serve people, you want to make a difference, we can help you. You can go to brand3.net. So pretty easy URL, brand3.net. And we have a link there where you can schedule a consultation, of course, if you just want to talk about some things you're struggling with in terms of messaging, marketing, and growth. However, I have we have a new thing we're doing. It's so new, I don't even have a landing page for it. So I'm just going to make it simple, but we're offering to do we'll do a brief high-level assessment of your current website through the lens of, is your current messaging actually getting through? Is it clear and is it communicating? So if you send me an email, or you can do it through the website too if you forget, but my email is just mwolfe, Wolf with an E, mwolfe@brand3.net. You can send me an email. I'm going to send you back a handful of questions, take you about 10 minutes to fill out and ask you for a URL. And we'll send you back, someone on my team will send you back a video with a high-level assessment of, because we're going to ask you things like, who are you trying to speak to? What's the message you're trying to convey? Is it working? Are you getting qualified leads right now from your website? And we'll give you some high-level insights as to why that might not be working and some ideas about how to address that.
Man, so we're getting the stuff hot off the press right now. It sounds like the
so it's a complimentary website assessment, because you can tell a lot from a website, and again, this flies all the way down to the story that your team feels that they're a part of. So
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Matt. And thank you to everyone who has joined. Thank you for the comments in the chat. So glad for those of you who attended this evening. We hope that you got something from this discussion. If you have any questions that were not answered, please feel free to comment on the live stream or DM Matt or myself directly. The Career Climb, we're off next week, but we will be back the following week with a brand new conversation. So make sure that you lock your calendars for that. It's going to be at 6 p.m. Central. But thank you all so much for attending this evening. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Matt.
Thank you so much.